Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot, the easiest way to deliver and sell your photos online. I am Raymond Hatfield, your host, and I gotta tell you, this is my favorite time of the year as we kick off part one of our two-part Best of the Year episode. This year, you have downloaded the podcast more than 600,000 times. That is amazing. And I did a little math. Combined, that is 68.5 years worth of photography education that you have used to grow your skills behind the camera. So these best of episodes are where I take the best nuggets from the interviews that you loved and downloaded the most throughout the year. This episode is going to be absolutely jam-packed. So with that, let's just go ahead and dive straight in. So first up, we're going to hear from Jason Matias. Jason is a successful fine art photographer, but he started out with a very simple point and shoot. So we talk about what was holding him back and how he knew when it was time to upgrade and why.
I didn't look at any education in photography for years, which is pretty stupid. But now that I think about
Is
it,
it?
I don't. I know you said just read the manual. There's so much in there, but yeah, maybe it's not stupid. But I just it was just trial and error, and then me applying, I guess, what I knew about composition at the time, or just my own kind of eye for things.
If you could go back, would you have chosen some sort of photography education? Because I mean, I look at you today and you're here, you're a professional photographer, you're pretty accomplished. Where do you think that plays a role?
Man, getting here sooner. If I started earlier on social media with good images, I could be in a whole different place today, right? When I hit social media with intention was about the time when organic reach stopped.
Yeah.
Right. And there's tons of artists out there who were in it before and they exploded with their reach. And and selling artwork is about getting more eyes on your work, right? And then some of selling artwork is having that clout that says you have earned all of these eyes. So I feel like if I had done all of that stuff sooner, then I could be in a different place, I suppose, or in the same place but better off. I don't know. I'm pretty. if old me looked at where I am now, he'd probably be like, "You made it," but I think he just didn't understand what it was to run a business and stuff like that. But yeah, I think just sharpening the curve.
Do you think that you would still be able to be the artist that you are today in terms of being able to tell the stories that you see if you didn't have those years of just, I guess, self-exploration?
Yeah, so I have the story and the art are two different things.
Yeah.
Like the story is you understanding yourself and being able to digest and then export that stuff, right? And then the camera skills, a whole different thing. So yeah, I think I could. I think that it was photography that forced me to do that self-exploration, that personal growth. So maybe if I had gotten started sooner, a lot of things might have been different.
But you could play this game all day. We could play this game all day.
Yeah, we could. For sure.
It's one of those things. I think about that often as well. Like me and some buddies, when I was in film school, we just made little shorts together, and we would put them on YouTube. And this was 2007, and then we put up 12 videos, and we're like, okay, we're done, But it's if that's one of those things, if you would have kept with it longer, who knows where we would have, been today with how much YouTube explodes. But So let's just move on and just forget that past there. I want to learn more about where you are today in your photography, obviously. And as a fine art photographer, I think it's always interesting talking with fine art photographers, because I think with listeners of the podcast, there's kind of this confusion, I suppose, of exactly what fine art is. So before we kind of get into some of your art and how it is that you see the world, can you tell us what is fine art and what makes it different than snapshots or just regular art, I suppose?
Context.
Context.
So for me, I think art equals creativity plus context. So without context, all you have is creativity or decorations. And context is everything. That's what goes deeper. Like a visual will help an audience get their attention. You know, and then people can ascribe their own story to whatever they see if they want. But most of the time, it stays a surface level engagement.
Yeah.
And then context is what brings people in. And context can be anything. It can be personal. It can be like relative to yourself. Like if you read a lot of the stories on my website that are attached to the pictures, they're not about the pictures. I don't tell stories about how I took a photograph. I tell the story of myself and what I was thinking and what I'm feeling when I'm writing the story, basically. And then the photograph fits the story somehow. And it's that context that brings you in. So it could be context about yourself. It could be context about what's happening in the world today, or greater human relative philosophy. But without the context, you just have a piece of creativity. So I think fine art and art is separated by that
Context.
piece of the equation.
Jeez, I don't think I've ever heard it described like that, and that really gets the wheels moving for sure. So we're not talking about intention, because I guess anybody who's shooting in manual, shooting with intention. So is the context is a story that we're trying to tell. So we already know the story that needs to be told. That's the context, and then it's the tool of the camera that we're using to simply be able to tell that story.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it. So tell me when when did this first happen for you? Because you were going out just taking snapshots of bears, you know, and today that's probably what very little of your, you know, your body of work is comprised of. So when did that switch from snapshots to, or I guess, when was when did that light bulb moment finally go off for you, and you start to switch the way that you shoot so that it does have more context?
It happened on Facebook. Like I actually remember this because it's really important to like my growth. But someone had commented, I think his name was Ben. Someone had commented about the boats that they see in my photos. Because I was taking photos and in all of the compositions there was a boat like in the distance or somewhere by itself, just one, like a yacht or a sailboat or something. And he was like, he said something about, it's cool. I like seeing all these boats, and I started thinking about it, and that's I think that was like the catalyst for me finding my way into this thing that I call comfortable isolation, and just having that solitary object. And then I started looking for that composition and creating that composition, right? And I have a whole Lonely Boat series on my website that's just of the boats, but also the more my images developed. So that was the catalyst. But then 2014, maybe, I started asking myself why I like this and why is it important, and why am I composing this way? And that's kind of when the next big leap in me solving my issues, right? You know, like photography was my therapist, I guess. Not in a therapeutic way, but just in a way of forcing me to ask questions. And I started digging deeper into that whole thing. So I think that's the answer to your question. I don't know. Actually,
Yes. It's just always fun to hear like the journey that people go through. And I'm there with you. Like when it comes to figuring out something about yourself through your photography, there really isn't much cooler because suddenly your work becomes your own and nobody else can take the same photos that you're taking. And it really is all that experience that you have. If you want to hear more from Jason, that was episode 285 of the podcast. Now, let's go ahead and jump on into my interview with Valerie Jardin. Valerie is a street photographer and host of the Hit the Streets podcast. Now, in this clip, I want to know what it is about street photography that Valerie loves so much, and then we talk about the freedom of just having one camera and one lens. I guess first let me ask, when you go out and shoot the street, what is the driver for you? Is it the thought of catching something interesting? Is it the thought of creating art? Is it just simply being outside and being able to work?
Oh, for me, it's the experience. It's
Experience.
A photographer once said, it's Abbas. He was a Magnum photographer, and he's a photographer who really said it the best. And I quote him often on workshops, and he said, "Get a good pair of walking shoes and fall in love." And that is exactly what street photography is for me. It's the joy of being out there and having the privilege to see the beauty in everyday life. And then, yeah, if I capture a keeper, I'm happy, but it's not going to be a deal breaker. I'm totally fine just being out there and capturing very few frames on a full day of walking the streets. Well, I'm very deliberate and very I'm very picky. I don't just press the shutter just randomly. So I'm very purposeful in my photography, and I have pretty high standards. So you don't get a wow picture every day. That's impossible, and no one does. But that doesn't even matter at that point. It's really being happy to be out there, and it's the experience. So the photograph is the icing on the cake, honestly. Just looking for those moments when, you know, the light, the story, and everything comes together. And then your preparation and then serendipity come and meet. That's the most amazing thing. And that's why I think street photography is so addicting too, because it is so difficult. And I don't know. Honestly, if I'm out there without my camera, I can be in the countryside without a camera. It doesn't bother me. Usually if I go for a hike in the woods, that's the only time I won't have my camera. But if I'm anywhere where there are people, it's like a kid with his safety blanket, security blanket. I would be lost without it. Yeah. It just makes me happy. At least I need to have it with me, whether I use it or not. It's a different thing.
Yeah. And who needs more of a reason than that if it makes you happy?
Exactly.
But speaking of, having a camera that you carry with you every day, 2 years ago, at the start of this whole thing, I was patiently awaiting a live stream from Fuji where they were going to announce a brand new camera when all of a sudden I see you walk out on stage and I get all excited and you announce, what to me was a dream camera, the Fuji X100V. And not that you need to go into the Fuji X100V itself, but can you tell us about your history with the X100 series cameras and what drew them to you for street photography?
Well, actually, it's a coincidence that we're recording this now because this week marks the 10-year anniversary of the X series. So that's when the X100 was born 10 years ago. I didn't jump on that first one. but I got my first X100 a year later. So it's been 9 years shooting with that same camera. And then I've had every one since then. 8 years ago, I became an official X photographer. And as you said, yeah, 2 years ago, I was invited to London for the launch of the X100V in February 2020. So that camera to me changed my photography. I think just the limitations alone. And I was shooting with a great camera before. My last non-Fuji camera was a 5D Mark II, and I had all the beautiful L lenses, and I mean, it was an amazing kit. But the minute I got that X100S at the time, that was it. I wasn't shooting for clients anymore. I'm like, why would I need that other camera? And I got rid of everything very quickly. At the time, you could still sell your DSLR for good money. Yeah. 10 years ago. And then all my lenses were just beautiful. They were in the box, and I had kept the boxes. So I sold everything. The boxes. Yeah, well, never get rid of your box if you want to sell your gear. So I sold everything, and all I had was that camera with a 23 millimeter 35 equivalent lens that you can't remove and you can't change. And those limitations, honestly, just really changed everything for me. Yeah. So I mean, I'll this is always going to be my favorite camera. Doesn't matter. And I've had the opportunity to try many other cameras since then. I always come back to that one. Even other manufacturers have reached out to me with some pretty amazing, very, very, very expensive cameras, and I always go back to this one. So this is all I need. This is all I need. Yeah.
You sold all of your other lenses. Like, you had the lenses. You're a working photographer. It's not like you can't afford other lenses. What is it about one camera, one lens that does it for you?
Well, my other kit was really for to work for clients. When I was using my 5D Mark II at the time for street photography, I either had a 50 or the Pancake, was the 40 Pancake, 40 millimeter on it, because it made the camera a little less conspicuous. So I already set limitations. I never brought another lens with me when I was shooting for me. All those lenses were really for client shoots at the time. So why, then once I was not shooting for clients anymore, I had no use for it. And this camera had everything I needed. And this would be, it is actually the camera that I took to Iceland even. I had everything else ready. That was just before I sold my kit. I went to Iceland for a few days on my way to France. And I had the 70-200, the 24-70 in the bag. And I had just received the X100S. And I wasn't so familiar with it yet. And at the last moment, just before leaving for the airport, I purposely left the Canon kit behind and left with just the X100S. And I really do believe that summer, I made a big jump in my photography because of those limitations. And I mean, it was a little nerve-wracking at first.
Sure.
And I know a lot of people can relate to this, and I see photographers coming on workshops with not so much anymore. Most people will just have a very small kit now with just 1 or 2 primes, or a camera like mine that you can't even remove the lens. But for several years, I saw photographers with so much gear on workshops, and every time I'd say, no, you leave. Just take that prime, leave everything else behind for the day. And I could tell they were like, they're going to have that anxiety. But once you feel good about that decision, wow, it's so liberating, so liberating. So any kind of limitations you can set will make you a better photographer, no matter what. So, and I haven't shot a raw file in 9 years. So
it's a great feeling. Now I understand, the whole giving yourself some sort of limitation. And I know that some people are gonna, as you said, feel weary about, going out and actually trying this. But let's like how do we tackle the question of like, well, what if you miss the shot? You know, because you have that wrong lens. Like, what do you do?
No. It's never well, if you miss the shot, it's your fault. It's the photographer. Well, then, if you miss the shot, it's never the gear's fault. First of all, why were you trying to get that shot if you had the wrong lens on? That's my question. So you learn to see with what you have. And I'm not going to try to capture a bald eagle in flight with my X100V at 23 millimeter, obviously. But that's not what interests me. I love to see the bald eagles flying over my house every day, but I don't need to photograph them. So you find the kit that works for you. And so the limitations, or also in a body of work, I think having the consistency of a focal length is quite nice versus, oh, this was shot at 200 and this was shot at 18. And it's kind of like, I think a body of work at a steady focal length looks much nicer. And then, and limiting yourself will make you work a little harder too. Mm-hmm. And if you work a little harder before you press the shutter, you will become a better photographer. Same with setting limitations of, limiting your time online. Whatever you do in post-process, not online, but in post-processing, whatever you do in post-processing is not going to make you a better photographer. It's the decision you make before you press the shutter that are going to make you a better photographer. And so limitations will help you do that. Just like limiting yourself to a certain number of frames for the day, and make every shutter click count will yield better results. I'm not telling people go shoot film, although a lot of people are still, or discovering film. But when we were shooting film, we made every shutter click count because there was actually a price tag attached to every shutter click when we bring the rolls to the lab. So we were better photographers, definitely. So I find that now with digital, people have a much faster learning curve because they can shoot a lot more without having to worry about, having rolls of film processed. But then once they get to a certain level, then they kind of stall. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they stall, because they're used to that unlimited shutter click count. Mm-hmm. And they shoot. Well, if you take the spray and pray approach, you're never going to improve. So limiting yourself in any ways is going to be beneficial. I'm not saying do that when you work for a client, obviously, but when you shoot for yourself, it's so beneficial. So there are so many ways to limit yourselves too.
Now, if you want to hear my full interview with Valerie, go ahead and check out episode 286 of the podcast. Next up, Ave Pildas. Ave does some of his photography on the street, but wouldn't classify himself as a street photographer. He does a lot of photo projects, series of images, and he's been doing it for 40 plus years. So he has a huge catalog of images. So in this clip, Ave gives some insight into his process of creating compelling series of images. Well, I love that idea of the different series of things that you see. And I guess I kind of have a two-part question here. One, do you go out with the intent, like, do you already know what your series is going to be before you go out and shoot? Or is this something where you go out and you shoot and then later you see a series starting to develop?
The answer is yes to both parts.
Whatever works that day.
Yeah, I say that I want to go to a certain place and take a certain kind of picture, but sometimes I never get there because I get waylaid someplace else. I like to say you can drop me anywhere and I'll find something to take a picture of. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I just say, I'm going to go to this area and see what's happening. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I have nothing planned, but I do gravitate towards things that I have of subject matter that I have taken pictures of before. Mm-hmm. Because they become part of my interests.
Of course, yeah, and those are always going to develop over time. But as photo series goes, I think one of the things I talked to many photojournalists say here on the podcast, and it seems like for them, the goal is to always tell the whole story in a single frame, and a photo series is kind of the opposite of that. So for you, I want to know, what is the benefit of being able to shoot multiple images?
Well, it gives you an in-depth study of what that subject matter is, and in many cases it leads you to photojournalism, where you have a subject matter, but you take the picture of the person, but then you might take a picture of their living room or their bedroom or their utensils or things, so you get it, or other people in their lives. So then you can make a whole stories around that. On a series, you get to see it's a little bit different. It's your one view, but the subject matter changes a little bit, even though it's the same. The picture changes, but even though it's the same subject matter, so it's not one object where you're completely doing a 360 around the object. You've got a like object, and you're showing the variations of that. So the series are really kind of a variation of something that I'm interested in. So, hey, look at this. This is what I see. You can see these things too. There are all these variations. I didn't take a lot of pictures on the street during COVID, but in Los Angeles there was this thing happening where there's a Veterans Administration out here on the west side of Los Angeles, and it's the only one in the area or in Southern California. So a lot of vets come to the Veterans Administration. It's a hospital. They get treated there, but I wouldn't say the Veterans Administration does a good job of taking care of their veterans. But there started to be they started putting up tents on the Veterans Administration grounds, and it's a big, lovely area. It has old buildings and new buildings, and then there was a group of vets that were on the street that runs along the side of the Veterans Administration, and they were homeless, completely homeless vets, and they were just the tents were just jammed one right next to each other, quarter of a mile, really. Wow. A quarter of a mile, one right after the other. Every one of them had an American flag on the tent facing the street. And, the vets, they were living there. So there was trash there. There was in the middle of that line, there was a table that people would drop off food and things. But I had a yearly habit. On the 4th of July, I used to take pictures of people in front of the American flag. Mm-hmm. So a few days before the 4th of July, or a week or so before, I went and asked if I could take some pictures of them, and told them what I'd like to do, that this was a really lousy situation, and that I was a photographer, and I thought that I could make people aware of this. And these vets were very skeptical, and almost all of them were damaged. They were damaged. They were physically damaged, mentally damaged. They couldn't get into their paperwork wasn't right. They weren't accepted inside the administration, so they were living on the street there. So during the COVID, I was able to get I don't know, a dozen of them to agree to have their picture taken in front of the flag, outside of their tent, and put those up online, and went back and gave them each photograph. But it was such a big problem that I said, oh my goodness, I can only make a dent in this.
Sure.
You know? But then after I posted some pictures, the news got a hold of it, you know, and sent their own crews out there, and they did a number of stories, you know, and my pictures were already up, and then brought up a lot of attention to it, good attention and bad attention. So the Veterans Administration finally got the message and moved a lot of those people inside. You know, they relaxed what they needed, you know, the correct paperwork, or, you know, like they wouldn't let people in if they continued to use drugs. So now they had a facility where they could move some of those people in, you know, and also you couldn't come in if you had a weapon. And so those people, or if you didn't have all of your paperwork, you couldn't come in. But and then the city got involved and cleared out all of the tents. So it really, it changed everything, you know. So now there are no tents on the street anymore. A lot of the people are inside, but those vets who still didn't want to go inside moved a couple blocks away under the freeway, you know, and they still have the American flag on the tent. And you know, that's more photojournalism, you know, because I took pictures of you know, the insides of the tent in some cases, and so it wasn't really like just waiting on the street for something to happen. I went there to make a statement. Yes. And that was just a little, but it's definitely street photography and photojournalism. So,
and being able to use those photos. So you think that being able to use those photos in a series, in a sequence, and being able to share them with the world gave it more weight because were more people able to relate with different photos?
Well,
you think that's why it picked up traction?
Yes, that the short answer is yes. But, you know, like, we are assailed with so many images every single day that unless the images get repeated and repeated and repeated, they fade because there's another image to take its place right away.
I love how Ave was able to do what he loves and work on his series of images of people in front of the flag, and then was able to use those photos to help those in need as well. So cool. Now, if you want to hear the rest of that interview, the full interview with Ave Pildas, go ahead and check out episode 290 of the podcast. One of the things that I know that is pushed a lot in the photography space is the importance of niching down to just one type of photography. And that is why I picked this clip from Lissa Chandler, who talks about how she does not niche down, but is still able to keep a cohesive look. So where does it get? Now I want to know, now we've moved into those weddings, right? Now you're shooting weddings. And taking a look at your website, you're also today doing seniors and families as well. Now, I know that there's a lot of pressure out there in the education space for new photographers that you should be niching down, but that wasn't your jam. So where did this come from?
I don't believe in everyone having to niche down because I don't think that is helpful for every photographer everywhere. I can't shoot the same thing every single day and be happy. I will feel like I am in a box, and I will not produce my best work. I will not be my best self. I will not any of those things. So for me, I thought very early on about what I wanted to do because weddings were so unexpected, and I love weddings. And one reason that weddings are a good fit for me is because they have so many elements to them. You get the candids, you get the portraits. There's lots of pretty stuff to photograph. There's downtime, like all of it. I mean, downtime, not really, but
right.
It's not all,
I know
it's
what you
not
mean.
all chaos the whole time, every time. But, just lots of different things about weddings that were attractive to me. But when I asked myself, like, do I want to only shoot weddings? I could never make that jump, because I like shooting other things in between. And I feel like the more I shoot other things, the better my work in other genres of photography becomes. I'm not saying that like everyone needs to do that. And I think that it's very wise to niche down. It's just like, for me, when I sat down and looked at it over time, I decided that I wanted to niche down on a feeling rather than a genre. And so that has always been my goal, is to niche down on that really colorful, bright, like happy, somewhat whimsical feeling that I have in my photographs, whether it's of a baby or like a flower or a wedding.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody describe that, niching down on a feeling instead of a genre. And I was actually going to bring that up, because it's like, if I go to your website, while you are doing several different genres of photography, they all have a very cohesive look. And sometimes I wonder, it's like, is that intentional? Because it's like, if you look at, one way that a lot of people try to stand out is that maybe they'll take it from one extreme or another. But for you, I love that you're just like, no, this is who I am as a person. This is the style that I'm going to put into my photos. And then we can still swap out the people and the locations, but it's still one of my photos. I had a question there, and I guess I'm trying to figure out what it is. But I guess essentially, I really love that approach to it and not niching down. So for you, why then? Now, this is more of a business question here. Mm-hmm. Why? Because another thing that people are told, that if you choose not to niche down, have separate brands or separate, Instagram accounts, separate websites and whatnot. Again, you decided not to do this. Was this for ease of your business, or was there another reason behind this?
No, I literally just could not picture myself shooting the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
That was the only real reason behind it. And then, the more I progressed, the more the more I really was like, you know what, like, I know how I want my photographs to feel, and I know how I want them to make people feel. So that is what I realized, as everyone around me was talking about niching down and really focusing on just one or two things. It never felt right to me. And I think that there are a lot of photographers out there that feel that way, but they have been told that they need to just niche down on, photographing high school seniors in a studio, and they shoot that, and that is all they shoot. And so when you put yourself in that box, it's so hard to even take that high school senior and put them in a field, because you're like, no, I shoot studio, I do this. But when you open yourself up to being able to create different kind of work, I think that it is very, I'm trying to find the right words. I think that it's very creatively freeing to be able to open that door and be able to be like, no, I photograph all of these things because I know how I want my photographs to feel at the end of the day. And when you're trying to create that cohesive feeling, it's going to come out in your work. And especially if you really focus on what you want to create and not what you think the industry wants you to create, it's going to come out and come through. And then I think people will be much more creatively fulfilled and are able to have longer careers and pivot over those careers.
Super cool. Now, if you want to hear the full interview with Lissa Chandler, you can go ahead and check out episode 292 of the podcast. Now, I know on top of being able to capture a great photo, the idea of making some money with your camera and paying for this hobby or even more is a really exciting idea. So in this clip, Gavin Wade, who is a wedding photographer turned CEO of CloudSpot, talks about the most popular print options that customers buy, as well as some amazing sales hacks that will not only give you a boost in sales, but keep people coming back. Win-win. I think I want to know, because I'm always curious from other working photographers, for you, what was I don't want to say the biggest source of profit in your business, but where would you find most people would, I guess, what sorts of products would people purchase the most? Would it be those 5x7s, or would it be full albums? Because, okay, I'm going to make this question even more complicated than it already is. I apologize. There's a lot of options in the CloudSpot store, right? To be able to buy for prints and product. What do you find to be the most popular so that we can trim down the size of our store?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag, I guess, a little bit on some of the data here. But okay, so, and we're always working to add more products to our store. We're actually adding something tomorrow. In fact, we'll talk about a little bit later. But and I think having a wide breadth of options to offer to your clients to allow you to have a fully tooled up store in terms of options is amazing, is fantastic. It helps project you as, that professional. It allows everyone to have those options of buying what fits well for them, and you can assist them in that. But looking at the data, what do people order, right? What do 99%, let's call it 98, let's be generous, 98% of everything that is ordered through our print partner labs, through all the galleries we offer, albums, canvases, metal prints, you name it, all those types of things, 98% is 4x6s, 5x7s, 8x10s. That's it, period, the end. So if anything, and again, those are the things that fill the frames, those are the things that get put on the fridge, those are the things that get hung on the wall, that is the bulk of what is ordered through our system. And that's just what the data tells us, right? So there you go, take that for what it's worth. But in terms of what's most often ordered, those are the three sizes.
Okay, now I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into this because I find that fascinating. So 4x6s, 5x7s, 8x10s, right? Why would any client decide to purchase any of those from us photographers when they can go to Walmart or Costco and get all of those for 19 cents?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to the service. It comes down to the convenience. Is a $5 hamburger from McDonald's? I'm not equating our work to $5 hamburgers, but just think of it this way: what people spend their money on for the sake of convenience. Let's go that route, right? $5 hamburger from McDonald's. How much do you pay DoorDash to get it actually to your door when it's all said and done? What have you actually spent, right? And why do people do that? Why in the world? You can run down, there's a McDonald's on almost every corner, yet you will pay someone from DoorDash to go and grab it for you and bring it to your doorstep. Nice little cold, McDonald's hamburger, and you'll pay 3 times, 4 times the price for it, right? Convenience trumps so many of those factors and hesitations. And it's one of those like devil on your shoulder, like, oh, I'm not going to offer 4x6s because they can go to Walmart and get this. A, quality from Walmart is not going to be what pro level labs are going to deliver your clients. B, you don't get to have your hand in that experience for them. And C, you don't even have the ability or, to upsell them as far as allowing them to order more things. Like 4x6s, 5x7s are the bread and butter, but they are not the all to end all. Like those are like the gateway drug to products and services that you can offer to your clients, like albums, like wall art, like all of those types of things. And we see a lot of photographers, will sell those types of prints and products, but they'll say, hey, look, anything that you order through me, yes, it's going to be at a marked up price, but A, it's through a pro level lab. So you won't be able to get access to these, which is printed on Fuji archival paper that lasts 100 years. But B, anything that you order, and we've seen people do this, like I'll fully retouch or I'll, edit and adjust or slightly tweak before it goes to print to ensure that what you've ordered is going to print in the best possible way. So we allow our photographers to get those sales, but it doesn't instantly go to the lab. We let them take a look at it. We let them swap out the image. We let them slightly adjust the crop just in case someone's head got cut off accidentally or whatever in those, 5x7s, and then you can send it to the lab. So still a hands-off experience, but with a high touch in terms of ensuring your clients have the best possible outcome. So that's what I say on that.
Now, you said the word upsell there, and that's a word that I think once you've been in business for a while, you like you like to hear. How are photographers upselling 4x7s, or I'm sorry, 4x6s, 5x7s? Like how are using upsells to make more print sales?
Yeah, I think more than anything, the biggest barrier is getting your clients into that buying mindset, right? Getting them into that gallery to do something beyond just scroll. And so, I'm sure you do this. I know we used to do this. It's providing print credit, or it's providing a discount. It's providing some type of action incentive for your clients to get in there and start doing the dang thing, right? And adding something to their cart, right? So, if you give them $20 in print credit, what's that actually going to cost you right after your markup? But, what's the value of getting someone already adding things to, I added 5 more prints than I should have, but you know what? I really need these for X, Y, and Z. Like people are already thinking through uses and gifts that they're going to be able to do this. So while we may think that we have to upsell them, all we really need to do 9 times out of 10 is just get them in that zone and they will upsell themselves. And so it's just what excuses, what opportunities are you going to be giving them in order to do that?
You know what I was just thinking in my head? I wonder if, as a surprise, because if essentially if your markup is good enough, say a $20 print credit should only cost you about $4 or $5 in actual costs. I wonder if, and maybe you have any sort of data, I'd love to hear this, if like surprising a client with, say, a $20 or a $40 print credit can go on to produce larger sales and actually be profitable. Do you have anything on that?
I mean, we know just by hearing feedback from our community that this works extremely well. Whether your client knows that they have the print credit going in, whether it's built into their package, we know some people do that, right? So like, hey, included with this package is $100 in print credit. You know, like you said, the hard costs of that are going to be almost negligible against the package price, but they feel like they have this thing that they need to use. An example that I've used in the past, and I just heard a story of, and it's so wild, but it's the psychology of sales. Is there was this car wash, and I think everything in marketing can be harkened back to how car washes run their business. But it's so car washes, for half of the people that came through the door after they got their car wash, they handed them a punch card, and it's 10 punches, and then you get your 11th wash free. So here you go, here's your card. So the next time you come back, you can start filling it up, and you'll get your 11th one for free. They did that to half the people. Then the other half, they gave them the punch card, and they already punched out 3 holes. They said, here you go, and your 11th car wash is going to be free. The percentage of people who had the punches, who actually completed that card versus those who didn't, was 80%. 80% of the people who got those 3 punches came back and got the full remaining 7 to get that 11th for free versus those who didn't. So punch their card, give them that credit, give them that excuse to come back and get that value.
Punch their card. Oh, now my mind is racing. Like, what are all the things that could be done with that? That is so smart. So much information there. If you want to hear more, that was episode 297 with Gavin Wade. And if you have not done so already, you can grab a free CloudSpot account for yourself over at deliverphotos.com. With the free account, you will not only get more free storage than any other photo delivery service, but you'll even be able to set up a store and sell prints for yourself. So get started for free and grow only when you need to. Just further proof that CloudSpot is doing everything they can to empower photographers with the tools that you need. So grab your free CloudSpot account over at deliverphotos.com. Speaking of delivering photos, this next clip is from my interview with Heather Daenitz, who is, as you will hear, kind of a commercial, kind of a lifestyle photographer, but all of it focusing on the wine industry. Now, this right here, what you're about to hear, is a masterclass in story structure and really taking your images to the next level. Now, Heather talks about her work with clients, but the same process can 100% be done for your own personal photography to elevate your images. I want to know, do you consider yourself a commercial photographer for wineries, or is there something else that you would call yourself?
I don't really identify with the commercial photography. Like every time I see that, I'm like, it sounds so like stuffy and bland. Like it's not, the way that I describe my work is photojournalistic. I guess editorial might be the way that people describe it. Right.
Okay.
I photograph wineries, winemakers doing what they would be doing if I wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So I'm capturing the real life situations. I'm a storyteller. I'm telling their story, doing my best to get in there and show how these wineries get their wine from grape to glass. And, so that's my style.
That perfectly answers the question. And actually, my next question for you was going to be about the storytelling, because I know that that's very important to you. On your website, mm-hmm. It says that you do storytelling for wineries. And I tried to think about that. And I was like, well, I shoot weddings. I go to mm-hmm. weddings. There's a very clear beginning, middle, and an end to a wedding. And mm-hmm. that's like the basic story structure. And what does that look like for wineries? What does a beginning, middle, and end look like for a winery? But I think you just said from grape to glass. But is this something that like you photograph all that in one day? Is this a longer project? How does that work?
Yeah, it is a longer project. So the life cycle of a grape starts in right now, actually. And, it's early March that we're recording this. So the lifestyle of the grape starts in the ground with the soil. The vines are about to start, we call it bud break. It's when the buds break out of, or the leaves and clusters and everything break out of the buds that they've been sleeping in for the last couple of months. So right now it's looking like I'm out in the vineyard, photographing pruning. We're finishing up pruning right now. So I'm photographing winter pruning. I'm photographing, there's lots of sheep and goats and chickens out in the vineyards right now too, grazing the cover crops. And so it's a lot of that sort of, quiet time out in the vineyard. And then once we move past that, it's, we're watching the vineyard grow. We're watching everything establish itself. And eventually in end of July, early August, the grapes are going to start turning color. And so I'm going to start photographing that and talking about that and sharing that story and, and all the vineyard practices that our amazing vineyard workers are doing every single day. And then we get into my busy season, which I think probably correlates a little bit with wedding busy season, basically from late August or like mid-August in the Santa Barbara County. It's about mid-August to early November is harvest season. And so that's when we're picking the grapes. And that's when I get the most action. And when I could potentially follow a grape to the winery. And I have done that. So last year I worked with a winery that was like, we want you here all day. We want you to capture everything. And so I started in the vineyard at, 5:30 in the morning. It was still dark outside. I was photographing the vineyard crews picking and harvesting the grapes. And then I followed these bins of grapes to what we call the crush pad, which is where the production facility, where they will destem the grapes, put them into open top fermenters. And then from there, I went into the cellar itself and photographed the cellar crews doing their daily rounds. And so they do things like punch downs, they do, and pump overs, which are ways to mix the fermenting juice with the berries. I'm trying to describe this in the most simple way possible. And so I was able to photograph that. And then, we went into the cellar and did some barrel samples with the winemaker. And so we were able to see some wine that was already finished. It was just aging in barrel. And then from there, we went into the tasting room and I photographed guests enjoying the wine in the glass and things like that. So that was the perfect example of literally going from grape to glass and capturing that story. And so then the vines go dormant and we're back at it and we get to start a whole new year again.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I want to know more about that process for, I guess what I want to know is when you show up, right? Or I'm sorry, let's step back even further. When a winery contacts you or reaches out to you and they say, yes, we want you to shoot for us.
Yes.
What's that next step? Is it some sort of planning process on what their story is and what photos need to be captured?
Yes. Yeah. So I always start off with what is the purpose? What are you after right now? If they're reaching out to me right now, they're probably looking for more lifestyle type sessions. This tends to be when I do less in the winery and vineyard and more in the tasting room or, in someone's home photographing, wine and food together. And so they'll reach out to me and say, hey, yeah, we're looking for this type of session, or we're looking to convey this. These images are going to be used for our our upcoming wine club shipment. And so we want to share those also on social media, and we want to, the goal. And so I'm always asking, because I'm both a marketer and a photographer, my goal is always to ask the client, what do you want? How can these images facilitate your business goals. So what are your business goals? And they'll say, yeah, we're trying to serve our wine club members, or we want to sell more bottles, or we're trying to create more brand awareness. We're trying to tell people our story. And so whenever they tell me one of those three questions, I'm like, okay, so then the next step would be to be like, okay, well, what are you envisioning? Like what triggered you to reach out to me versus someone else? And they'll be like, oh, we love this aspect of your work. Oh, we love seeing, what I call the bottles in the wild. So these are wine bottles that are out in the world being enjoyed in a more lifestyle type setting. I'm like, okay, great. Cool. So that's what you're after. So you're wanting to serve your wine club members and you're wanting to show off more lifestyle stuff. Great. Okay. So then the next step would be like, all right, so are you wanting to show smiling faces, enjoying wine, laughing and socializing? Are you wanting to show food pairing ideas, whatever? And so we'll hone it down even more. And then we'll come up with a shot list and we'll say, okay, so now we want to create X, Y, and Z. And I'll create like a Pinterest board that sort of gives the vibes that we're after. I'm like, okay, so if this winery is, what I always ask them, if they don't have a brand kit, I'll kind of guide them into what I'm looking for, what I need to properly do my job. I'm like, okay, what's your brand voice? Are you a little bit more serious? Are you sarcastic? Are you a little bit more playful? Are you friendly, endearing? Like, what are those qualities? And so they'll tell me that, and I'll create an inspiration board that reflects that. And they can add to it as well if they've seen any sort of inspiration type shots that they're like, we would love to sort of create this in a way that makes sense for our brand. They'll put that in there. And so then we have our shot list, we have our inspiration board, and then it's shoot day. And I always have a lot of fun on my shoots. I try not to take it too seriously. I know that there are some photographers who will go out and they are just very like straight faced, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's, for me, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. So I'm like, I know I'm going to go have fun with my clients and tease my clients, and we're going to have a bunch of fun. It's going to be great. And yeah, so we get our shots done, and I edit I have like a specific style. So I try and keep things as true to how I remember it as possible, but like elevate it a little bit. So maybe a little bit more vibrant if that's what the brand is after. Like if the brand is a little bit more fun and exciting and, young and hip, whatever, our colors are going to be a lot more bright and vibrant. And, the light is going to be a little bit more intense and loud, like we'll use harsh light in that kind of situation. If the brand is a little bit more serious and kind of moody and sarcastic, we'll set ourselves up in sort of a darker area, and we'll soften the light a little bit, and we'll make it a little bit more dark and mysterious. And so we'll do that. And so it all depends on the brand, like you can tell a photo has been captured by me because I have a general style that I stick with, but I work towards what the brand's attitude is, what their mood is, what they're after, their personality.
If you want to hear more from my interview with Heather, go ahead and check out episode 298 of the podcast. So we have officially made it to the last clip of this Best of the Year Part 1 episode, and it is with former Chief White House photographer Pete Souza. So, Pete photographed 2 sitting presidents, and I asked questions revolving around something that so many of us will never get to experience, the idea of knowing that you are photographing history. It's interesting I was going to ask about that because I know that, there's probably a lot of meetings that happen in the Oval Office. There's a lot of people in these meetings. I guess 2020. In 2020, I interviewed John Suhu, who is the lead team photographer for the Dodgers. And he said that the hardest part of his job was, and as a baseball fan, I know that you're going to understand this, is knowing all of the milestone stats to capture, because there's so many of them, For you, when there's so many people in the room and there's so many meetings during a day, how how important is it for you to know the weight of what is happening in that moment?
Oh, I think it is important. I mean, I think it affects the way you photograph. I mean, but and a lot of times it's just intuitive, or you notice something. And, I think I've done that throughout my career. I mean, sometimes you miss like those signals, but more often than not, you can tell when the president is stressed about a decision, or, this aide and that aide disagree and what should be done about a particular issue. And, there's going to be, not a confrontation, but there's going to be that is going to come up to the surface in front of the president, those sorts of things.
So how often is it simply reading the room versus knowing what's going to happen beforehand? Or I guess, is there...
I'd say 99% of the time it's reading the room.
Mm-hmm. And is
most
that
of the time I have no idea what's going to happen. 99.9% of the time it was just, fly by night.
And that's just a skill that you develop over years of being a photojournalist, is to be able to put yourself in those right places.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in this idea that, we, the public, see like some of your best photos, right? The photos that come out that you're proud of, or however they get released to the public, they stand out for one reason or another. I want to know from you, the photographer, how many times did an instance happen, say a photo that people love, and you think to yourself, oh, but it could have been so much better if I had been in this other situation?
I think that's how often that happened. I don't know, but it's just the very nature of the kind of photography I do, which is, fly by the seat of my pants and, trying to capture the moment, trying to compose things well. And, sometimes you're just a split second too late or too early. At least for me, photography is not like riding a bike, right? I mean, I can go 2 weeks without riding a bike, get on the bike and ride just as well as I did 2 weeks ago. But with the kind of photography that I do, which relies so much on anticipation, and you sort of got to get into the swing of it. And because I was doing it every day, I think I was at my highest level of, and my percentages of getting the shot were pretty high, just because I was always in a good rhythm, because I never took time off.
Wow. Yeah. That's something that I've shared on the podcast before, is that come October time, I'm the best photographer I am throughout the year. Come April, the beginning of the year, it's some of my worst weddings every single year. So I totally get that.
I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, I get that. I shot a wedding a few months ago, and I was more nervous of doing that than any time I was ever at the White House, because, I hadn't shot a wedding in probably 25 years, and, I didn't want to mess it up. Right.
Sure. Of course. But at the same time, that's so funny to hear, because, I mean, you have such a finite amount of time in the Oval Office that it seems like the weight of that is, would be much more. So what's the difference for you?
I think I do well, when I'm in my comfort zone. So, and I think my comfort zone is, for, maybe this wouldn't be true for most people, but when I'm in the Oval Office or in the Situation Room or aboard Air Force One, those are all comfort zones to me, And non-comfort zone is there's this big, huge event on the South Lawn with hundreds of people, hundreds of press, and I'm not on the press stand, but I'm trying to find, an angle that's a little different, where I'm not in the way of the press photographers or their shot, or and then that's not my comfort zone.
I see. That makes sense. Do you have any idea how many images you captured over the 8 years in the office?
Yeah, it was like 1.9 million.
1.9 million.
I mean, I don't know the exact total. It's like
sure.
1.9, 7.3. I don't know what it was, but I didn't get. I was upset that I didn't hit 2 million. It's like
so close. I guess the point of that question was then to ask, what makes one image stand out above the other 1.9 million photos?
I mean, photography is subjective in so many ways, but yet there's images that I think 99% of us would agree, yeah, that's the picture. But there's a lot that are subjective, and I remember early on once we started posting monthly behind the scenes photos on Flickr. Alice Gabriner was the White House photo editor that I had hired, and we were putting together, the latest set for the previous month. And I had this picture looking in the window because I was always looking for different angles. So I was outside the Oval Office looking through the door window, and Obama had a football in his hand. And in one, he's cocked back. He's sitting at his desk, cocked back, ready to throw it. And the very next frame is he's thrown the ball, and it's kind of like in midair. And we're going back and forth on, which is the right image. Again, it's subjective, right? Sure. And Alice is like, "Oh, I'm just going to put them both up." And that was such a unusual, out of the ordinary way for me to think, right? Because like a newspaper, you would never do that.
Sure.
You'd have to pick one. You'd have to choose. But with, Flickr, it was like, well, we can't really decide, so let's put them both up. So that was like a whole new way of thinking for me.
If you could go back and you had to choose one, do you know which one it would be?
No, I don't. I mean, I think because now, the fact that I'm remembering that story, which is from like probably May or June of 2009, is indicative of the fact that I think it was like the right thing to do.
Pete just has so much photography experience, and it was truly amazing to be able to talk to him about what it really takes to make an impact with your camera. Now, if you want to hear more from my interview with Pete Souza, go ahead and check out episode 324 of the podcast. And that is it for this Best of the Year Part 1 roundup. I don't know about you, but I am pumped and ready to get out there and shoot right now. Be sure to come back next week where we are going to finish strong with Part 2. But in the meantime, I want to invite you to join the Beginner Photography Podcast community on Facebook. It is the safest place on the internet for new photographers to share photos and get feedback. So if you haven't already, go ahead and head to beginnerphotopod.com/group to join today. And that is it for this week. Until next time, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.